Today, I'm going to tackle the age-old question of, is it better to pay off your properties or to keep them leveraged and potentially own a whole bunch more properties? You might have already made up your mind about this, or it might not be something that you've even considered, but I'm going to offer a few perspectives that you might not have thought about, and I'm going to do it right meow. I'm Kirby Atwell from Living Off Rentals, and I want to preface today's discussion by saying that one size definitely does not fit all when it comes to deciding whether you're going to pay cash for properties or maybe eventually pay off properties, or you're going to take out loans that will give you the ability to potentially leverage and buy more properties. So in order to determine whether using leverage is the right strategy for you, it's important, I think, to understand where the term comes from and what it means. So I think a lot of people just think of leverage as synonymous with debt or with financing. You know, it gives you the ability to purchase more of something than you actually have the cash for. And that's true, but the actual definition of where leverage comes from is the exertion of force by means of an object used in a manner of a lever. So let me just give you an example. So if you have a 50-pound weight sitting in front of you and you go to pick up this weight, maybe it takes all of your energy to pick up this one 50-pound weight. It's all you can do to pick this thing up. And you know, that's not the most efficient way potentially of getting this 50-pound weight up in the air. And so you go and you find a seesaw, you find a teeter-totter, a lever where it's basically a board and you've got one side up in the air and then you slide the other end under that 50-pound weight. You sit on the end that's up in the air and you can now lift that 50-pound weight up in the air with ease. You just put your body weight on it and your body weight does all the work. And so you're thinking, this is great. I just lifted 50 pounds in the air with ease. Let's go do another 50-pound weight. So then you set up another lever right next to it with another 50-pound weight and you stand on one foot on each side, and now you can lift two 50-pound weights up in the air. And so that can go on and on. You can go do three and maybe lay across the teeter-totter and lift three up in the air. Now, eventually though, probably there's going to be a storm or there's going to be some issue that's going to come along and it's going to knock you off of that teeter-totter, and not only one 50-pound weight's going to fall, but all three are going to fall at the same time. So that's a visual representation of what happens a lot of times with leverage in financing in real estate. You can buy one property with all your assets. Maybe you have $50,000 and it takes that whole $50,000 to buy one property. Or you can take $25,000, put it as a down payment, borrow the other $25,000, and now you can afford two $50,000 properties. Or you can spread it even thinner. If you ask any finance person, maybe an investment banker or a corporate finance person, whether it makes more sense to buy with cash what you have in your bank or to leverage financing and buy much more, they're always going to tell you, definitely leverage as much as you can because the returns are always better. And they're right. If you just look at a spreadsheet as they do in an air-conditioned office, just staring at a spreadsheet all day and just look at the numbers are always going to tell you to take out more leverage, because if you can afford one $50,000 house that rents for $900, or maybe you can pay a little bit of a financing cost, but you get two $50,000 houses that both rent for $900, so you have $1,800 coming in, the return compared to what you're paying in financing typically is going to be much better. However, these spreadsheets don't take into account two very important things. Number one, they don't take into account risk. And number two, they don't take into account the personal toll that owning more assets might have on somebody like a real estate investor. So first, let's talk about risk. So when you use leverage, it amplifies everything that happens on an investment. So let's use, for example, that same $50,000 house. If you were to buy it with cash and that house increased in value by 10% because the market just increased in value, then you would make $5,000, right? However, if you bought two $50,000 houses next to each other and used $25,000 to purchase each of them, and then you took a loan for the other $25,000, and the market goes up 10%, you just made $10,000 because you own $100,000 worth of assets because you bought two different houses next to each other. The thing that most people don't consider is that negative leverage acts in the same way. It amplifies just in a downward direction. So if you own one property free and clear, you paid $50,000 for a $50,000 house, and your tenant eventually moves out. Maybe there's some issue and they move out and you've got a vacancy for a little while. You don't have a mortgage to pay, so you don't have the risk of a bank coming in and taking that property. However, if, say, a disease like COVID-19 hits and nobody's traveling and you own 10 different Airbnbs that you leveraged heavily on all of them, and now you have no tenants, you have vacancies across all of them, now you owe the bank 10 different mortgages that you can't pay, and they come in and take all of them. And it's going to be much, much more painful. So that's an example of how risk works. It can work in a positive direction. You know, the leverage can work in a positive direction, or it can work in a negative direction when you owe much more than you can possibly pay because of some issue that happens. So I think risk is easier for people to understand, even if they're just sitting in an office and they're buying and selling assets on a computer and they're not actively engaged in the management aspects of those assets at all. They can understand intuitively how risk will impact those assets that they're leveraging. However, the second component, the personal toll, is much less intuitive unless you're a real estate investor who is somewhat engaged in the management. Each time you purchase a property, you are purchasing a set of problems. You are purchasing a time commitment. You're purchasing a lot of components that can go wrong, that will go wrong. They all have an expiration date on them. The roof is going to go bad at some point. Your furnace is going to have to be replaced. All of these issues will happen at some point, and so you as the investor are committing yourself personally to making sure that you manage through those aspects, whether you're doing it or you're hiring somebody that you're going to manage to do it. Managing the manager is a real thing. You are going to have a personal toll by each property that you take on. So maybe it's easy for you to manage one property, like we talked about before. Maybe you can buy that $50,000 property with the $50,000 you have in your bank, and it doesn't take that much of your spare time to manage that property. But then once you leverage that $50,000, like we talked about, where maybe you put $25,000 down, you put another $25,000 down over here, and you buy two properties, now you've just doubled the amount of work and doubled the amount of issues that will come up. So you can talk about economies of scale, and you can talk about using systems to mitigate all of these issues and getting people to do a lot of these management tasks for you so you don't have to do them. But at the end of the day, you are ultimately responsible for all of the components on that property, everything that comes with it, all of the paperwork, all the utilities, all the different aspects of owning a property. So when you're trying to decide how much of your money that you should leverage to purchase properties, I highly advise that you consider how much time, how much energy, how much life force, how much effort it's going to take from you personally to actually manage these properties. Don't just sit down on a spreadsheet, go through the numbers and say, hey, the numbers say I should buy 100 of these properties with the money I have in the bank, because you could get yourself into a big jam. So I want to conclude this by saying that I am not against leverage. I think leverage can be used as a great tool. I built my entire portfolio from the beginning using leverage. I would buy crappy properties, I would rehab them using private money, and then at the end, I would refinance them into a long-term bank loan. This is the age-old BRRRR process that a lot of people use, and it's a great system to use. The problem is people don't talk enough about that personal toll, and so it works great on the first property. It can even work great on the second property and on the third and the fourth, but eventually a lot of people start to get over their skis and they start to leverage way more than they can personally handle anymore. And that's when the quality starts to diminish, the margins start to diminish, and you start to have a lot of problems. And you can see a lot of portfolios that were great from the start, they grow too big, and then they start to crumble in on themselves. So I just want you to consider that as you think about whether it makes sense for you to leverage and how much it makes sense for you to leverage, because that's the secondary question that comes with it. Look, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Also hit the subscribe button, because this is a new channel. I don't have a lot of subscribers, so it means a lot to me when you subscribe, and you'll also be notified when new videos come out. I release videos similar to this on helpful rental investing related topics on a weekly basis. Also, you can go on over to Facebook and join the Living Off Rentals Facebook group. It's a great community. There's a lot of really smart rental property investors that hang out there. You can ask your questions, start conversations. I hope to see you there, but if not, I will see you in the next video.